Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today, in today's podcast, we are going to talk about everything related to one person's journey to gain his CFP certification. And that is Oz Shtrosberg from MAG Financial Services. Hello, Oz.
Hello, Jackie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed on the podcast today, and because you have been on an interesting journey over the last, 12 months or so, just short of 12 months, I think, to gain your CFP, haven't you? So we're going to delve about in all of that in a second. But first of all, I would like our listeners to understand a bit about where you've come from and how you came across the CFP. So let me start by asking you, how did you get into the financial planning profession?
Okay, so I essentially, in one word, I proposed. That is to my wife, my now wife, because I studied economics at university. I moved away from the finances completely. And then with my now wife, then fiance, went to dinner with her father. And being interested in, or at least wanting to show interest in what he does, I said, what do you do? To which he replied, I'm a financial advisor. I said, that's wonderful, but with all due respect, what do you actually do? So he explained, and we had some further talking, and following on from there, I joined him almost 9 years to the day on the 9th of February, 2015. And 9 years later, here we are.
Wow. And was that primarily a financial advice role to start with? You went straight in of, learning the ropes and, going to client meetings. Was that kind of straight off the bat?
Absolutely. So we are a small firm. We're a niche firm based in Manchester. And I essentially, for the first, however long it worked out to be, was under his wing. So shadowing meetings, seeing client interaction, which obviously was very important because that's something that in addition to the technical stuff and all the certification in the world, if you don't have that ability to communicate well with the client, it's not going to go very far. So to begin with, yes, I went straight into effectively a paraplanner, or rather a shadow advisor, if you like, on the back of which I then became a fully fledged financial advisor myself.
Wow, fantastic. So how did you come across the CFP, and why did you want to become a CFP professional?
So in the first instance, of course, I achieved my level 4 diploma. And I did feel at the time, having had little knowledge, I would say, relatively speaking, that I wanted to push myself further academically. Really, it was a case for me of wanting to learn more so that I could give more value to my clients. That was always the objective, long-term objective for me. Around that time, I also happened to join Next Gen Planners. This is going back to 2017 or 2018. And let me take this quick opportunity to shout out Next Gen Planners, because you will struggle to find a more encouraging and supportive community. The CFP community, I've come to learn, are a close second, but Next Gen Planners are definitely something that, whether you are a new advisor, a newcomer to the profession, or someone who has been around the block, I would highly recommend looking them up and joining, if applicable. So I joined Next Gen Planners, and I remember at the time, this was the 2018 Next Gen Planners Conference at the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester. I actually had a 30-second conversation with another CFP professional called Amir Roshalima, and I asked him, should I now be going for chartered? Should I now be going for the CFP? Amir was a big proponent of the CFP. And he said to me, the level 6 chartered is great because other professionals recognize the term chartered. And so it should definitely be on your radar. but the CFP will be the aha moment, as he put it, in your financial planning career. And all I can say is Amir knew what he was talking about. I did study. I did end up going down the chartered route first, which really was quite lucky in hindsight, because the CISI, by the time I had completed my chartered studies, the CISI introduced a new pathway for chartered planners, and I'm happy to discuss that should you wish, Jackie. But it just meant that I was able to take 2 professional assessment units in lieu of the level 6 exam. And then onto the CFP, which, as Amir would said, just put it all together, just tied that bow around all the knowledge and all the years of experience with clients, and technically, it just seemed to complement everything that I've done to that point.
Yeah. And I always say to people that it's quite hard to explain, like Amir said, your aha moment. It's very hard to explain until you've had it yourself, isn't it? So, looking back now, I used to say to people that, being chartered with a CII is great because you have those kind of blobs of technical knowledge, if you like. It's another technical term there. But the CFP and the case study assessment is about applying that knowledge. So you need the knowledge to start with, but actually being able to apply it in what appears to be a relatively straightforward fashion, although we'll get onto that in a minute, but with 4 conflicting client objectives, it actually becomes quite a complex piece of work, doesn't it?
It very much does. And I do feel that looking back, I couldn't have taken it at a more perfect timing from my perspective. The reason being is that, as you rightly said, the chartered, with the CII chartered status, was brilliant at getting to a level that I guess other professionals would recognize that you have a certain understanding and you can provide a certain value to a client and to a client relationship. At the same time, learning cash flow modeling and financial planning and lifestyle financial planning was crucial. The CFP just seemed to thread that whole equation together. There is something that about the CFP case study that is really, it's not meant for clients, but one can very quickly see how you can take things out and improve the client experience that you give to your own clients by going through the CFP process.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And that is echoed. I'm sure lots of CFP professionals who are listening are probably nodding away themselves right now as well. So tell us a little bit about how you found the case study. What was your initial approach? Did you have a particular plan of action set in place?
I did know a little bit in advance, both from talking to CFP professionals, yourself and others, as well as listening to this very podcast, that the one thing that was plainly evident to me is that I would need support. Not only because I'm in a boutique firm, so I don't have people to walk around corridors and have as a sounding board, not CFP professionals, but just how different it is relative to everything else I've done up until that point. So the first thing I did was join your 4-day intensive course, which again, in hindsight, was a rather good move. I think in reality, if I look back, there is absolutely zero chance that I would have passed it without having enrolled on the course. That's quite clear to me. And the reason is quite simple, because even someone who has done cash flow modeling, and whether you use your own proprietary cash flow modeling tools or whatever it may be, the CFP makes you think one step back on everything that you kind of that you understood up until that point, from understanding assumptions, which I know is one of your favorite topics, to building a financial plan using Excel. It really requires you to look at things slightly differently, and having someone on your side that knows the methodology and what it should look like and the pitfalls to look out for is absolutely crucial. So if there's one thing I could summarize as far as my experience, is go and get help. That's the top and bottom of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about the issues that you faced in the case study and during the course. Were there any particular sticking points where you kind of thought, oh, yikes, maybe I wish I'd done a bit more preparation before joining the course on that area, or, having that time, because, the course that you were on, we did 2 days, didn't we? The Wednesday and Thursday, then we had the Friday off, or not necessarily the Friday off, but the Friday away from me chattering at you. And then we reconvened on the following Monday and Tuesday. So where were the sticking points for you?
So if you take even a step back further than that, I received the day I received the case study, it was a school half term, and I was flying out for a week's holiday with the family. And I did my absolute best and actually succeeded in not looking at the case study a single time before getting back home, which was quite sensible, because had I done so, that would probably have signaled the end of the holiday for me, because the brain would have started working, and arguably on the wrong lines. Because, as you often say, when someone joins your course, don't immediately look for solutions, follow the process. So the first thing I did was that, just don't even look at it. Then I thought, hold on a second, the course is in a few days' time and I've not even read it once, so I should probably do that. I've started reading, and the one thing that I could foresee being a problem, and indeed proved the problem, it was the estate planning piece. And that's not because of a lack of understanding or experience in that space, but more the fact that there wasn't a perfect solution. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to wanting to find that perfect solution. And one thing one should go into the CFP knowing is there is no perfect solution. These, as you rightly already said, are conflicting objectives, and you will struggle to find a way. You will not find a way to meet all of those. Otherwise, it would not take 60 pages of writing, etc. So when it comes to that, I guess from my perspective, this is where having the ability to chat to you, Jackie, about my thinking and have it challenged in a constructive way, and knowing the case study inside out, it really just brought it all together. The estate planning, for those that do go in your course, is the last section that we tackled. And from my perspective, I feel like I somewhat ran out of steam by that point, if I'm being brutally honest with myself. But really, that's the one section that, in hindsight, whether it was the CISI professional refreshers or others, I could have potentially done a touch more work on prior to the first submission. Thankfully, it didn't quite fully stop me.
Absolutely. And, Oz, you're not alone in the estate planning section proving, you're undoing or that you run out of steam, because so many people say to me, I was kind of sick of this case study. I'm sick of the clients by the time I get that far, and there's still all of the calculations to do and clarifying how to set it all out and the areas to tackle. And like you say, that issue, it's like doing the giant 3D jigsaw puzzle that I said so many times on the course, didn't I?
Absolutely.
There is no one perfect solution. And I think many of us, particularly if we come from a technical background, we have been trained and through sitting exams that we have in the past, that there is this one answer. There is this perfect answer. And that's the bit that I think you're right. You've kind of got to leave it at the door, haven't you? You've got to be open to a range of different answers. And I think was particularly evident on your course was that a number of people had exactly the same case study as you. So for those people who aren't aware, there are about half a dozen or so case studies in circulation. And sometimes it can be a blessing having the same case study as somebody else. But there comes a point actually when, as you start to make those recommendations and the decisions, because everybody's approach is very slightly different, your case study, your answers, your recommendations can end up in a slightly different place. And then you start getting the twitches, don't you?
Correct. Absolutely. And this was something that I almost, in a way, and coming back to the structure of the course, the fact that it was a 2-day course, Wednesday and Thursday, in inverted commas, quiet Friday, should we say, and a weekend, and then back into it Monday, Tuesday, did mean that by the time it came to Monday and Tuesday, it was great insofar as having time to recover and time to do some further exploration and make sure the spreadsheets are solid, etc., before you progress. But importantly, like you say, it also meant that by the time we came to the Monday and Tuesday, people came in with their own vantage point, which is always going to it was always going to be different because it's based on your experience and things that you've done and things that you've not done and what are you more comfortable with, etc. And the beauty is that there isn't any one perfect solution. So therefore, your solution could be viable as long as your spreadsheets prove that there is evidence to back it up, essentially. And so, yes, it was really useful to have that community or that group that you can listen to, ask questions, etc., including yourself. But at the end of the day, you also have to be able to shut that off and say, this is what I'm going with. My numbers hopefully are correct. And thankfully, for my estate planning, the calculations were correct. So when it came to making some adjustments, they were literally minor in that I simply forgot to write something up. But outside of that, it was the course, again, made sure that even just listening to other people speaking about their case study, which might have been different, you picked up a couple of nuggets that you could then use on your own case study or things that jog your memory about something you may not have considered. It was super useful to be a part of that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess at the end of the day, you've got to remember that it's your financial plan. This is your qualification. We want you to become a certified financial planner. So the same size doesn't fit all, particularly where the case study is concerned, that you have got to, by consequence of making those recommendations and those decisions, then you will naturally, even if you ended up in exactly the same place as somebody else on the course with you, you would still write it up differently, wouldn't you? So it
Absolutely.
still could potentially look different, sound different to whoever was reading and assessing it.
Absolutely. And it goes right back to the FBSB 6-step process and how one delivers financial advice. And we'll get on to things like how it informed my work post CFP. But the important thing is that it's really the process is really the guideline. You then have to put a bit of you into it, and that would mean naturally people will take in different directions. But importantly, as long as you can evidence your work and you can show that the numbers stack up, I think the beauty with the CFP markers and assessors are that they are themselves obviously CFP professionals, and so they've been through the process and understand exactly what you're going through as far as trying to find that perfect solution, failing to find that perfect solution, and then trying to understand from the text the client's how to prioritize the client's different objectives. And so it almost feels like a live document effectively in a way, how you would treat a normal client if they sat in front of you.
Yes, absolutely. And these case studies are normally built, certainly years ago when I used to write them for the IFP, I would get 2 or 3 of my clients from my previous job working in an accountancy firm, and I would splice together the combination of interesting facts from 2 or 3 clients to create these case studies. So they are designed to be as lifelike as possible to try and benefit you, obviously, once you gain your CFP. And it helps you in the real world, helps you give, hopefully, better quality advice to clients. So let me ask you, before we move on to looking back and seeing what difference it's made to you on a day-to-day basis, just tell me how many hours you put into the whole financial plan assessment process.
So this is a difficult one, and as I mentioned before, I've listened to many an episode of your podcast, and I know that previous guests have mentioned the 150 to 250 hours. I'm happy to go with that figure, although all I will say on top of that, it was that for 10 weeks solid, it was in my head nonstop. I mean, it was the first thing on my mind waking up, last thing on my mind falling asleep, and my wife will probably be delighted hearing this when she does hear the podcast. But it's one of those things that is literally all-encompassing. It takes over your days, it takes over your evenings. And so whilst I can't give you an exact number, the 150 to 250 is just when you are probably solidly working on it, but it does not leave your mind whilst you're in that 10-week stretch.
Yes, and that's very true. So if you have another half at home or parents at home, it's something you do need to warn them about, I think, before you embark on this process,
absolutely.
isn't it?
Absolutely.
I remember interviewing somebody else. I think it was Daniel, and he was saying that his wife was absolutely sick to the back teeth of him talking about it. Well, he was putting the kettle on in the morning. He was talking about these clients whilst she was making dinner. He was sat there chatting to her, and he was still talking about the clients. When they were getting ready for bed, he was still talking about the clients, and she was like, "Oh my God, these clients."
It sounds very familiar. That's all I can say. Very, very familiar.
Excellent. Well, at least it was only the kind of 10 weeks-ish. So tell me what happened. You sent your first submission in, and what happened next?
Yes, so I sent my first submission, and to be very frank, I know that you always recommend, and you state outright, the beauty of the case study is that you have both the case study, so the information, as well as the marking criteria. So really, you should be in a position where you are able to mark yourself. I'm terrible at that. If I'm being, again, intellectually honest with myself, I'm absolutely terrible at sitting there and saying, have I answered, this or that? And so I didn't do it. I'm sorry, Jackie, for just advising you of this now. But the key was that from a point of view of what happened, I submitted, I did the best I could. I submitted my first submission, and then I think it's about 3 months later, knowing that I think there is a 70 or 80% failure rate on first submission, and correct me on this one if I'm wrong, Jackie. I got an email to say that I have not managed to pass, but on a positive, I was marginally away from passing, and so I qualified via various criteria for the rapid resubmission, which essentially meant that I was close enough on all but one or two. In my case, it was one, which funnily enough is estate planning, and one element of the plan. And I had, should I opt for it, I had 3 weeks in which to resubmit a second submission, and then I would get my result. I think it was 5 weeks after that. So that was instead of having another 10-week stretch and waiting further for the results on second submission, which of course, having reflected and having looked at my submission again, and then also arranging to discuss things with you, Jackie, I took the opportunity and managed to pass through this on my second submission through this rapid resubmission pathway, which, there you go, I was very, very pleased with. 3 days before Christmas, I got a thumbs up. So that was a nice way to sign off on 2023.
Absolutely. And many congratulations for doing all of that. Your testimony, your patience, your determination all came to the fore for you to be able to be successful. And it's great testament to your hard work that you could just get that very marginal fail with just that one area, that all-elusive, running out of steam estate planning area to
Indeed.
fix. So fantastic. Very, very well done from all of us here. So
thank you.
Looking back then, now you've had a little bit of time to reflect on all of the ups and downs of becoming a certified financial planner. What are your takeaways? Where has it benefited you?
So interestingly, even as I was doing even as I was writing the case study or preparing the spreadsheets, which, by the way, I have to say I absolutely loved. I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but I really enjoyed the spreadsheets. Once I got up and running with them, tweaking them was great fun. It was actually the writing that I found a bit more painful, and that's probably again why estate planning, which was the last thing we handled, was the write-up was not quite enough to get me over the line. But nevertheless, even whilst I was doing the case study, and definitely following the completion before I even got my result, I started, just prompted me to look at how we do things at MAG Financial Services, the proposition, the processes, literally from the ground up. And the idea really was, again, using the FPSB's process, six-step process, just to see how we can add more value to our client relationships. So things like the case study itself, if there was if there was ever to be a discovery session that doesn't quite meet those kind of standards as far as what I saw in the case study, we need to go back and get information. If we wanted to have complete clarity, as you have to a degree in the case study, on what the objectives are, have them reviewed and go and speak to the client about how do we make them both quantifiable and put a term in place and things like that. So it just made me reassess how we can improve our processes. And really, strangely, taking the CFP made me also, on a separate note, more confident in the value that we do bring to clients, and how, when we do things right and collaboratively with the clients, the impact that it can have on the client's lives. So it did both. It did both simultaneously, make me challenge everything that we do, but at the same time show me the kind of value that, or rather give me confidence in the kind of value that we can bring to a client relationship.
And that's really interesting, because, quite a lot of people say to me that it helps them, maybe in client meetings, like you were saying, going back for that extra clarification, or actually when you're in the meeting, just kind of, sitting with a client and helping them understand, what their objectives might be, just asking those few extra questions that maybe you wouldn't have asked before.
Absolutely. It shows you that, or rather it tells you, doing the CFP and undertaking the certification, that really, in order to be the best version of a planner that you can be, you need as much information from the client, even if the client at the time doesn't quite see the point in telling you. So it's really asking you to fish for all the information, to have kind of completeness in mind, and not be afraid to dig a bit deeper, because sometimes the client might not know themselves how and what impact that the answer that they're giving might have.
Yes. And I think also it gives you that opportunity to say to the client, well, I can kind of transport you in your bubble to the future and open the doors and show you what the future might look like. But there are going to be some, as we found in the case study, some natural consequences of things that can't be achieved along the way. So then it can give the clients that space to be able to think and discuss with you whether that really is the most important thing, for example, or whether actually something else that has to give along the way, maybe that is more important actually in hindsight.
Absolutely. And actually, coming back to the case study, the one frustration, and I'm sure you've experienced it over many years, is the fact that you can't go back to the clients and clarify whether objective 1 or objective 2 are more important to them. You have to try and figure that out based on the text. Whereas in real life, you do have the opportunity, should you wish to take it, to go back to the clients, whether it be through a strategy meeting or a follow-on discovery, to say, look, in reality, the numbers don't quite stack up. Let's talk about why is this important. Let's talk about whether one is more important than the other, how best to meet in the middle, etc. So actually, the frustrations that you might have with a case study and the inability to have a further discussion with the client is, in real life, you can allay this by going back, asking the questions, and figuring out what is the best path, given any conflicting objectives you may have.
Absolutely. And so in that confidence that gaining the CFP has given you, has it made you look again or about the kind of the style of the client interviews that that take place?
Absolutely. I think it's both the style, it's the questions, it's figuring out whether, going back to the drawing board on whether we combine just the basic fact find collections, collection of information. So this is just the very basic info, and we do a separate discovery that is more a blue sky thinking and a more kind of fireside type chat and discussion. There's so many ideas swirling in my head as to how best to extract the information in a way that engages the client, in a way that makes them confident and trusting, because of course, still you can have all the certificates in the world. If again the client doesn't trust you, then that's all out the window. So it made me reflect on how best do I go about getting a client, number one, to trust me, so that they are open with me, give me honest information, give me correct information, and put me in the best position to give them the most value.
Fascinating stuff. And it's really great to hear the benefits of all of those weeks of pain that I put you through. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. No pain, no gain.
But we're all worth it in the end. I think it's testament to, your approach and your dedication of the whole process from start to finish. And it was absolute pleasure to work with you for those weeks. So we are nearly at the end of our time together today, Oz, but I would like you to give us some tips for those people who are thinking about embarking on the CFP process. Maybe they're sat on the fence, or maybe they've heard that, I've got to give up my life for those 10 weeks. Give us some tips and then words of encouragement.
Absolutely. So I'll actually start with the words of encouragement, with your permission, Jackie, because the one thing I've realized, I mentioned earlier Next Gen Planners and what a community it is. The one thing I've realized is that the CFP community is absolutely phenomenal in its willingness to support aspiring CFP professionals. I've spoken with a number, I've reached out to a number, and every single one of them has had time to give, has had a willingness to support, and always left me saying, if you ever need any help, or if you ever want to chat about something, give me a shout. So that's as far as encouragement. And again, separate to Next Gen Planners, because it's a slightly different person that is within the CFP community. But as far as encouragement, everyone has been extremely, extremely supportive. So that's the first thing that I would say. You're joining what, as a newbie to the club, is a very, very strong community and a supportive community. That's the first thing. As far as tips, and I have been giving this some thought. So my first tip would be timing. Timing obviously is important, but what people often miss, and I mean, in hindsight, it is silly, because with a 70 or 80% failure rate on first submission, you have to think not just about the initial 10-week window to ensure that you're able to commit to it, but look at when the results will be coming out. You can see the date on whatever submission window you're working on, and make sure that at the very least the next 2 or 3 weeks after that, in the hope that you do, if you were to fail, like me, you'll qualify for the rapid resubmission, make sure those are free, just in case. Because if you do get that email to say, this is, unfortunately, you haven't passed this time, really the last thing you would want is to then have to cancel client meetings or free up some weeks after. So 2 or 3 weeks after, make sure those are also ring fenced for potential CFP work. That's the first tip that I would say. Thankfully, in my experience, it worked well. But again, it's something that should be considered. My second tip is, if you are chartered, if you happen to be chartered with the CII, to look at the professional assessment pathway. So, I mean, from my perspective, I would take 2 online assessment modules over a level 6 exam any day of the week. And once you do register, you've got a year to take those two modules. And I can tell you from experience that they are a lot better, let's put it this way, a lot easier, I would dare say, than a level 6 exam. So effectively, from that perspective, if you are already chartered, it's a really nice route to straight onto the case study effectively. And the final point I would make, and I cannot, even though I've mentioned this plenty of times during our discussion, the final point I would make is, first and foremost, seek help. It doesn't matter how experienced you are as an advisor. It doesn't matter whether you've been doing cash flow modeling since the day you left university or before that. Knowing what a CFP case study submission should look like and how to avoid the pitfalls is absolutely crucial in this whole process. And I'll say it again, from my perspective, I will not have passed without the course and Jackie's support. That's from my perspective, plain and simple.
Thank you, Oz. That's very kind. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their certified financial planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.